We're at episode 60, folks, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. And, I'm so excited to have this distinguished group of intellectuals here on the panel tonight for this specific reason. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to be talking about January 6th Select Committee Chair Benny Thompson raising red flags on Representative Mo Brooks' possible connection to the panel a day after the Alabama Republican told reporters he might not comply if he was called to testify. Brooks seems to be singing a different tune now. We also are going to be dealing with Florida's redistricting mess, heading towards a special session after Governor DeSantis vetoes a defective map. Former President Trump calling on Putin to release dirt on President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Virginia Thomas's West Wing contacts raising new questions for Trump ally John Eastman, and the U.S. not buying Russia's de-escalation talk. We have no new guests on tonight. We have Maya Perry, who is originally from North Carolina, who attended Howard University School of Law, recently graduated. She is looking to continue her career in public service with a policy council position focused on voting rights. It's always a privilege and honor to have her contributions to the panel and to this show. So Maya, thanks for being here. We also have Mr. Egnu Nwankpa, who is currently the vice president at one of the largest financial services institutions in the world. He's a part of the supplier diversity and responsible resourcing team, where he serves as a supplier diversity manager, specifically for local markets and partnerships. He serves as an advocate for small and diverse businesses, a liaison to key partner organizations, a project manager for strategic initiatives, and a manager and analyst of related supplier diversity spend data. So we're glad to have a voice from the private sector on tonight. Mr. Nwankpa, thanks for being on. We also have Jordan Strudwick, one of the smartest guys I know. He's on the panel tonight. He works at Zimbabwe Networks, which is a firm aimed at transforming the lives of millions worldwide by modernizing central bank financial infrastructure and simplifying how money moves in the global digital economy. Ismail Ibrahim, who's currently working at a firm himself. He's currently employed at a finance law firm. Also, a recent graduate of Howard University School of Law. There's a lot of us on tonight. So Ismail, thanks for being on. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Davis, who served 12 years on the South Bend City Council, which made him the longest serving African-American male who served on the council. He's a social work faculty member at Capella University and at UMass Global University. During the 2020 campaign, he served as a spokesperson for the Biden campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the conversation on Virginia Thomas's West Wing contacts with Trump ally John Eastman. This was very alarming to me. I know you have Senator Elizabeth Warren saying that, among others, saying that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas should recuse himself from any January 6 cases. I want to get your take on whether or not that's likely to happen and whether or not you think that should happen. Anyone can jump in.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to see if anyone had any thoughts.
Well, it's definitely very unlikely to happen. Just starting there, I almost can't imagine Clarence Thomas voluntarily recusing himself for the reason of Jenny's behavior. It definitely should happen. Obviously, it looks terrible. Like his wife, who ostensibly is his closest confidant, is clearly trying to be an actor in this process and has an agenda and is openly trying to pursue that agenda, and it makes him look suspect, especially now with people saying that there's some clear criminal issues happening here. It's a really bad position for a Supreme Court justice to be in. And in a sane society, yeah, he would have to recuse himself.
I think the pressure is going to be on Justice Roberts to ask him to step aside on this issue, because of the fact that people look at this as the Roberts courts, and this is going to reflect on him under his leadership. when you look at the chief, I mean, the chief of the Supreme Court is what we normally define the courts as. We look at the past courts in past years, and we always look at it as the chief's court, whatever their name was. And so I think, given the nature of all the information that's coming out with the January 6th committee, which is going to really be targeting the summer, is going to be better for him to deal with that, because the role that she played has been very significant. And people don't believe that the two of them just don't ever talk about these kind of issues at their home. She's trying to say that we are separate. I don't influence him. He doesn't influence me. Not the case at all. She's been influencing him since she sat right behind him back in 1991 and during his confirmation hearings, even when she got on the phone to call Anita Hill and was leaving messages on Anita Hill's phone call. And so, she's been very active in his life, more so than a lot of people have dealt with.
I would be. So sorry, please. Go
I'm good.
No, I just want to say that I'm sure this isn't the first time that a justice has been asked to recuse themselves. So I think that we should look at, what has been the consistent rule over time. And I know everyone always feels like the current political climate doesn't call for traditional norms of procedure. But I would, maybe caution against that and see how this has been applied in the past and apply it to this situation. If he does deserve to be recused, it should be insisted that he recuse. And if he doesn't, I think, but I really don't know too much of the specifics. So I just would kind of lean towards the historical procedure.
I wanted to add quickly too. I think my gut does tell me that he probably will, be resistant towards it. But I also just something about him, I see him as a wild card, particularly in this situation, that he might just try to call himself, I guess, jumping, trying to get ahead of it, maybe trying to kind of dodge some things and be elusive by just taking himself out of the running. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, but I bet on him likely, trying to be a part of that decision. But I do agree. I think Roberts and all of the justices, hopefully Ms. Brown, she'll be confirmed by then. So if she has some type of input sway as the rookie, her as well. But interesting to see. And I agree. I definitely think they clearly talk about these things at home. That's why, spousal privilege and all those things exist, is because legally, to be considered an item, you two are, one and the same, financially, socially, otherwise. So they can't hide from it forever.
Also, I would say in the past, well, in current, when you look at it, about 150 times, it said a lot of justices currently recuse themselves on a regular basis when you look at the history of that. So it's not necessarily this would be the first time that this has been done or this is setting a precedent. It's pretty much a common practice on almost every single level of law that I've had to deal with, whether it's county, state, federal. So that's not something that he would be dealing with. And it would be, I think this, with the new potential justice coming on the court, who is also another African-American, it's going to put pressure on him. There's a pastor that said the way you put pressure on another person is by putting somebody similar to them right next to them, and then their game has to either be shaped up or they are going to be exposed. And so I almost questioned the fact that he even needed to go to the hospital during her confirmation. But I thought that was rather odd.
What's interesting, when we talked about this book, Peril by Bob Woodward and Bob Costa on the show before. And, I recently read the chapter where John Eastman comes up with 6 proposals in a memorandum to present before the legal team, looking for any kind of excuse to overturn the election results in 3 states, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And number 6 was one of the most chilling of all of the recommendations, because it basically was calling on Pence to, agree or I give some acknowledgement of legitimacy of alternative electors, therefore putting some doubt on confusion in terms of the legitimate electors, throwing the election into chaos and allowing Pence to say, well, since we don't have a clear winner by this date, Trump is reelected. Now, this same John Eastman seems to, have had, based on how Virginia Thomas's involvement, the timeline changes. And Jamie Raskin is the one who pointed this out, because he said this adds a wrinkle to the timeline. Contact with Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in the weeks after Trump's defeat, pressuring him to try to overturn the election. Eastman's involvement might have had new confidence, because they might have said to themselves, well, if this ends up in the Supreme Court, we definitely got Thomas's vote. And so I want to get your thoughts on that. Was it more likely than not, in your view, that Eastman had a specific reason to believe Justice Thomas would support this radical proposal?
Well, I think we should look at the case for what it kind of is. There's already been a ruling by the Supreme Court, and the only dissenting on January 6th, and the only dissenting voice was Clarence Thomas. So I think, before we look forward, we should already look to the ethical violation that we probably have with him already ruling against evidence being admissible on January 6th first. I think the Democrats are weighing what they will do, because they realize the clock is running out, and if you lose the House, which is not for sure, but could happen, then the Republicans will quickly squash all of the January 6th investigations, because there seems to be a little bit of blood on the hands.
Mike, this may be more than what you want to tackle here, but do you think it's a successful path for the Democrats to keep pursuing January 6th as a headline narrative going into the midterm elections?
I think that, well, first of all, I think time is of the essence as it pertains to this committee investigation, because as we're getting closer and closer, and the public has yet to see a public hearing yet, the odds are increasingly in favor for the Republicans to take a majority, either one of the houses or both. And so I think right now, politics aside, if the Democrats don't aggressively pursue this, 2024 is already open. It's already open season, but it's even more. It gives legitimacy to the efforts to overturn the election. If they give up, if they suspend the committee investigation for the sake of political points.
Right. Okay. I definitely see that point. I think that's a fair point, but politics is politics, and I'm sure they've given up on much more, loftier ideals to win an election than like making sure that the perpetrators of January 6th are, held accountable, which is important. I think it's definitely important, but I just question how much do American people really care about the January 6th committees with the state of, the country, inflation, war, foreign policy. So it's just a question. I appreciate you, giving me the leeway. Thanks.
I think it's going to be important with January 6th, more around May and June. They have to reach some kind of conclusion between May and June. To get into July, August is going to be too late, too close to the fall election. And I think that they will end up wasting all of their time. I think that they need to do it late spring, early summer. That would give them at least the time to be able to deal with that. And hopefully there will be no more taking out of the American, I would say, mindset with the Will Smith and all those other things that have distracted us. But as long as we can stay focused on things, fine. But that is a very key point that you bring up. How much will they be able to stay in the forefront? Because everything else comes in our mind, and we have a short attention span.
And just to bring it back to the Supreme Court, could you imagine if, Kagan or Sotomayor or, one of the Democrat-appointed justices had a significant other that was actively engaged with trying to get the Democratic candidate elected? Could you imagine the uproar that would be on Fox News and Newsmax and every other conservative outlet you can find, And so the fact that, yes, we're dealing with inflation, yes, we're dealing with Ukraine, but this is such a bombshell. I mean, this news broke, I think right before this show went live last Thursday. And I don't think it registered for a lot of folks at how serious this is. I mean, the Supreme Court is supposed to be the one institution that's untainted. Of course, that's subject to, all kinds of criticism, especially as the Supreme Court has become more politicized, and these appointments have been more politicized. But nonetheless, I mean, to have the spouse, and mind you, she has been actively engaged in traditional conservative politics going back to the 90s. This is someone who was in the establishment wing of the Republican Party, the Bush wing, Romney wing, the McCain wing. And to have her now, if you saw the language that was used in the text messages, it was so bizarre to me. I mean, the King of Kings is going to be on our side to overturn this election. It really sounded like, if I didn't know whose wife she was, I would really just think she was an average Trump supporter, based on the text messages. Any other thoughts?
She's deep into politics, more so than people realize, and deep into conservative politics, and has had this whole long history of dealing with that from the time that she was born back in Nebraska, and she's born in 57, and so she has been more active than a lot of people have ever realized that. And she was one of the first speakers there on January 6th, and she was a part of that. And she helped even fund a lot of those people that were there. There's a lot of information about her key involvement in revising that. And when you're that kind of a role, and you are next to somebody, it puts a heavy light on you. I even remember when Senator Clinton, when she was the first lady of the country dealing with healthcare, that people did not like that. That put pressure on the president. And so the first lady puts pressure on the president, and her actions happen, or vice versa. Their spouse's role is very important. And they can get a lot of people fired or hired, and they cannot distance, like Ms. Perry said. You cannot distance themselves from that with all of the different kind of ways that they are trying to do. That's not possible.
And I just want to add too, I think, I can't remember where I read it. I feel like the Times kind of broke this maybe like a month or so ago, and maybe not in the same way, but they definitely framed it about Ms. Thomas's connection to, the conservative circle, how questionable it was. And so now it's like, as things have become uncovered, one of the, kind of basis of their, if I'm not mistaken, one of them was married before, I think it was him. And then after their relationship, one of the things, the way they came together was, in the conservative circle, like socially, fundraising, things like that. Like that was the basis of their relationship, essentially, is those strong, really conservative, traditional beliefs. So now for them to come forward and act like that's not what we talk about, that's not us, it really doesn't make sense. And the other thing I was going to say is just the same way that they, found a relationship and a marriage out of that little, close-knit circle, I think it's just as likely to think that Eastman was a part of that. And, all things considered, there was some kind of, conspiracy for him to be that confident, because legally, historically, there was no reason for him to be like, I got this. The only thing, that you could be depending on is socially, politically, to be that sure, especially at the level in the federal court, the Supreme Court. Only that kind of confidence could me some kind of inside knowledge.
And even in terms of Ismail Reid, whether or not the public support is there, you've got, earlier this part of the year, 4 in 10 Republican voters approved of the January 6th panel. And, as we're continuing to go forward in this year, February 8th, the Pew Research Center showed that fewer now say that Trump bears a lot of responsibility for January 6th. But they're still interested in finding out or getting to the bottom of this, and so, public opinion is there. It's around 46%, according to the Pew Research Center. But as we're continuing to move forward, it's crucial that there's more transparency. Just to pivot the conversation forward, the January 6th committee is also hearing some willingness or apparent willingness from Representative Mo Brooks who was representing, the district where I went to undergrad, Oakwood University, which is very interesting. I remember going to some Madison County Democratic meetings, and they used to make a joke. It was like a running joke that they would invite him to certain events, and they would say, well, he declined to show up. And it was almost like a formality. And so what's interesting is that this comes after Trump decides he's not going to endorse Representative Mo Brooks for his bid for re-election. And so I want to ask, do you think that Representative Mo Brooks signaling to the January 6th committee that he may cooperate is solely derived from spite against Trump, or do you think he stands to gain politically somehow? It's weird to me, that he would make this decision. But, at first the Democrats were saying, well, we're not really sure that he'll even come forward. And now we're in this week, all of a sudden it seems like it's going to be more likely than not. This was just hours after Trump revoked his previous endorsement of Brooks. Go ahead.
I think it's always been embarrassing to say that Mo Brooks represents my home state, my home city. I'm born in Huntsville, Alabama. But I remember I followed his career from the time he started way back in the 80s and everything else. This is something where Trump has stepped on somebody he probably shouldn't have stepped on. And now that just a few days ago, he's removed his endorsement, then you're going to see Mo Brooks open up all the can of worms. That goes back to earlier comments. Will this January 6th be in people's mindset? I think honestly it was running out. It was running out of steam. But now Mo Brooks was one of the main organizers of all of the riots. He was the organizer of everything else. He was working with the Supreme Court Justice's wife. He was working with everybody. He was there when he knows where all the bones are buried, because he helped bury them and performed the service and everything else, did ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and he kept a record of all of them, And so therefore, I'm just stunned. I mean, I think Trump went too far on this one. You don't mess with Mo Brooks because he's a wounded soul, and I think he's going to come out with everything else. He's willing to do that, and he's going to share more about that. Given everything else going on, I think it's going to really help fuel the Pence movement and everything else. And one last thing, once Garland, I think the key thing to January 6th is what's going to happen with the Justice Department. And with Justice not Justice, he's not the Justice, but with our Attorney General, if he comes out with some major case in the next few weeks, it's going to put teeth in January 6th. People don't know if the January 6th committee has any teeth. That's the big question. And even some of them questioned that the other night. If Garland comes out with some meat that he throws to the American people, combined with what Mo Brooks is about to throw out there, combined with everything they find on Ms. Thomas, and she's an attorney too, so she can't get away with not knowing the law because she is an attorney herself. So you put all three of those together, it's going to be some nice juicy meat coming up in May, June, and July.
I'll believe Mo Brooks when I see him testify with his hand in the air and actually say something. I think
I understand.
It's a game of chicken, and Donald Trump. I've yet to see someone really go through full-fledged and say what they know against him out of fear. So Mo Brooks, I expect him to fall in line. He's definitely a rank and file Republican, and his district, half of it, I wouldn't say, maybe 40%. What do you say, Mike? Is maybe not with him, but the other 60% will vote with him, even if he shoots somebody on Fifth Avenue. So I don't see Mo Brooks going through with it. But maybe I'll be surprised. There's always one.
I saw some recent poll numbers that weren't too good. He was running third place last poll number I looked at. So
and now you bring up the fact that he's behind is the only reason why I think he may share some of this, because now he feels that Trump has killed his political career. Okay, so now you're going to go after me, and I'm bleeding, and it doesn't look like I'm going to recover. If he doesn't recover, then I think he's going to share. If he starts to recover, his numbers go up. I agree with you. I think he's going to shut his mouth.
Yeah, I think the polls are interesting, but Alabama,
I know
you never put anything past them down there. I would love it if he I think that would add a lot of spice. I mean, that'd make it almost like a TV show, right? Somebody that's sworn and they come out and tell the truth. But
I wanted to say really quickly too, I think, you do want it to come before the committee, of course, of sworn testimony, the publicity of that and the weight of it legally. But I also think the same way he kind of went, through the press to kind of put the buzz out that he may or may not be willing to testify, he may still, kind of keep testing it from the social media press angle, like you said, and kind of see what the numbers look like, wait things out, see how everything else plays out. But basically buying himself some time. But I think, waiting for the moment where if he does have to pull that card, he will. And I can't wait to see it. I do think there will be a lot to come from it, even though I'm one of those people that doesn't really believe, I don't think the committee has teeth. I don't think they're really going to get much done. But if he were to jump ship and start to sing like a canary, then I would have a little bit more hope.
Who are the prime targets of the committee? Because I really haven't paid much attention as I probably should have.
We're talking about Jared Kushner actually spending 7 hours with the committee today. Spend 7 hours just pleading the fifth, behind closed doors. So there's some talking that went on that happened today. You also have Mark Meadows, who, you have a lot of folks who are blowing off the committee. Actually, Mark Meadows is one. I think John Eastman. But as we're continuing, as the trail is becoming more and more clear, as we're finding out new things like Virginia Thomas. But just to go back to Mo Brooks, the Alabama Daily News actually revealed that Brooks was considered the front runner for months. This is the results show a deep slide. The same poll in August showed him actually leading the pack of Republican contenders with a 40.8% share of the vote. And so now he's dropped by 24.7% in almost 8 months. And so, the question is whether or not that's Trump's, fault because Trump didn't endorse him, a bump in the polls if Trump came out and endorsed him the way he's endorsing David Perdue for Senate. But the fact that this fall has seemed to be in the works for quite some time now indicates to me that maybe there's something beyond Trump. That, maybe the Republicans are having some fatigue about Mo Brooks. He's been the congressman for that area for a while. They've got other candidates. They've got this gentleman who was his claim to fame is being the captain for Black Hawk Down. They have another billboard I've been seeing anytime I go down to Huntsville is one of this woman Britt, who's also running for that nomination. So it's a very interesting race, but just stands to show that this guy's been falling from grace for quite some time. What do you guys think?
I think some of that had to do with the case that was just settled that he was under from Representative Swalwell when they took that on. I think some of that others had to do with just how, at first, with the stronger the January committee came together, it was hurting some of those Republicans. And then I think it started to wane off. He got targeted because he was pulled out. I thought he was going to pick up some speed when the court ruled in his favor. And then when this came out, I said, So it's a mixed bag. I still think we're about 2 weeks away to see what he's really going to do, because this is still that testing moment for him in Alabama. And Huntsville is changing a lot too. Huntsville has changed a tremendous amount, where it's becoming more Democrat than what it used to have been in the past. And so that is also a key thing as the population continues to rapidly grow in that area. And the northern part of Alabama is starting to have a stronger say from that standpoint.
I just want to say it does seem like Trump himself does have some fear of Mo Brooks singing, because he did so quickly turn around and start to try to make him seem less legitimate, calling him woke, like implying that he's kind of switching sides. He came at him so fast off of so little that it does seem like he's watching this guy particularly carefully. And then when you find out that this guy who spoke at the January 6th rally was wearing a protective vest at the time under his windbreaker, and that he slept in his office that night instead of in his condo because he was afraid of some type of violence or danger, it just really seems like if anybody knows something and it may, you know, accidentally or on purpose say the thing that sinks the ship, it seems like this might be the guy. So I'm hoping that something fruitful comes out of this. It seems like a pretty rich opportunity.
What's interesting about this whole thing is that we're talking about Mo Brooks revealing that Trump reached out to him not in 2020, 2021, guys. I mean, this was a few months ago. The election had already been a year ago at this point. And so this effort to overturn the election, you know, anyone telling you, oh, let's just let that thing go. I mean, this is an ongoing saga. And so, you know, just go back into the importance of this, you know, committee. This committee's work is extremely crucial. We know that once November comes and, you know, things go the Republicans' way, that's it for everything. But, you know, the fact that he reached out to him in 2021, August 2021, you know, we were already dealing with the Afghanistan withdrawal fallout at that time. And it's just amazing to me. And so I'm wondering what other damaging, juicy tidbits does Mo Brooks have to share with this committee? You know, remember, this is the guy who was helping rally up the January 6th attendees. And then, you know, the question back in January of 2020 was, you know, how do these people know where specific offices are? You know, I'd really like to know if Mo Brooks played a role in helping, you know, inform the attendees as to where Jim Clyburn's office was, where Nancy Pelosi's hideout. I mean, just different areas.
Mike, this doesn't sound like the Russia investigation all over to you again, or no, or no? Like for me,
the Mueller investigation.
It has the same feel as like the Russia investigation on some, even though I think that the January 6th investigation is much more important for the reasons that, you know, people have spoke on tonight, that it fundamentally matters whether people try to interfere with the United States democracy. That is a very important issue. What I'm trying to question, and just like it's important of whether what the Russia investigation was about, the stated goals are always meaningful, but it's just like student loans are still an issue on the table. People's healthcare is still an issue on the table. So many issues, and the Democrats are just, you give them a little bit of power and they want to not focus on their constituents. I don't understand where the disconnect is with Democrats dedicating so much of their time to it just feels like Russia all over to me again. Like, I'm not going to pontificate about it, but it's
what Russia is that Russia we didn't see happen right in front of our eyes. You know, there were revelations of specific ties, George Papadopoulos, other Trump, you know, inner circle personnel being involved with specific you know, members of the Russian government. But we actually saw the active effort to overturn the election, you know, so that what are you going to tell us? Don't believe our lies. Like, we saw it. And we didn't just see, you know, chaos. We saw death happen in the Capitol building. We saw the desecration of the Speaker of the House's office. I mean, so I think this is different for the reasons that, you know, everyone who had television or who had access to the internet afterwards has been able to see the violence and to see the chaos and to see the results, the fruits of these efforts to overturn the election. It used to be just Giuliani going out in the stump and, you know, making a fool of himself, but now we actually saw this, you know, the results of all of these, all of the fuel given to these accusations and conspiracies that the election was legitimate, and it's a dangerous thing, and so that's why I think, you know, if we've seen that, and there's still active efforts to put in place individuals who would overturn the election. David Perdue's main tagline in the campaign is, "I would not have certified the Georgia electoral votes." And so, I mean, 2024 is very much at risk.
Well, I would say 2024 is a risk, as you have said. And that's the thing, because what this committee and the Justice Department could find is if they find that there was some kind of planning to overthrow the government, those kind of charges, as you all who are attorneys would know, will prevent President Trump, former President Trump, from being able to run again. And all those who were close to that could also not be able to run again for dark catcher, anything in their city, state, county, whatever. That's the key. And if that happens like that, then the Mike Pence's, and that's one of the reasons why down in Florida, Governor DeSantis is getting ready for all of that, because they kind of think that it may happen. And if that happens, they jump to the lead of that kind of thing. And then the last thing I'll say is one of the reasons why I think Mo Brooks is getting a little shaky, because the last Alabama person that helped Trump was Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions was the first senator to get out there and stump for him. And Trump flipped on him and knocked him out. And Jeff Sessions and Mo Brooks were really instrumental in helping Trump. They put their necks on the line, and he flipped on them. He flipped on them from Mobile, and he had his big rally in Von Braun, and Trump did, when he was talking about calling everybody's mamas this, and the NFL's mamas that. He did it from the Von Braun in Huntsville, Alabama, with Mo Brooks up there. So now he's about to turn on the second person in Alabama. So I think there's going to be some canary singing, because Sessions should have sang earlier, and he didn't. Now I don't think Mo Brooks is going to fall for that as easy.
I like I said, yeah. In my time on this earth over 40 years, I'll be shocked. But hey,
I'm hoping for a shock, man. I'm hoping.
Hey, Mr. Taylor predicted Georgia, and before the election, I told him no way. And look, you live long enough, you learn.
Yeah.
If there was ever a time, I think, for such kind of shock, now would be it. There was one more thing I was going to say, I forgot. But yeah, I think in general, people, specifically the Democratic Party, has to keep reminding people of what's really at stake. It's not just about, making sure the people that were sitting, taking over, I shouldn't say sitting, taking over, ramaging the congressional offices are held accountable, but it's also about making sure that we uphold the legitimacy of all future elections, and those currently in office and hoping to come behind them as well. So I don't know. It's really touch and go. I think it's getting to a weird point in politics where, I don't know, maybe I just didn't pay attention to it as well, but it's more emotion based than I've ever realized or seen. I don't know if that's new, but I think that's going to play a lot into it, especially because things are, like you said, so public now. I think pride is more easily hurt when it's in front of thousands of people, millions on Twitter. So,
and we've been talking a lot about 2020, but I've honestly been feeling like it's 2019 again, because you have the president reaching for foreign interference, foreign assistance to dig up dirt on Biden again. Former President Donald Trump, in a new interview, called on Russia's President Vladimir Putin to release information. And look at the timing, guys. The timing. Information regarding alleged dealings between Eastern European oligarchs and Hunter Biden, President Biden's son. Trump's remarks in an interview were published Tuesday by the Just the News television show on Real America's Voice Network, of course, the conservative outlet. And making his claims about Hunter Biden, Trump cited the findings of a controversial, highly politicized investigation by Senate Republicans into the Bidens, which published just weeks before the 2020 election, and produced very little evidence of any wrongdoing at all. Trump repeatedly promoted these claims of foreign business dealings by Hunter Biden, specifically alleging that he received millions of dollars from the wife of Moscow's late mayor. He said she gave him $3.5 million. And now I think that Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it, Trump said in the interview. He said, I think we should know the answer. And of course, this interview was conducted in Mar-a-Lago. The White House shot back today. The White House mostly has dodged questions about Hunter Biden and his alleged dealings with Eastern European oligarchs, noting that he does not work for the government, unlike Jared and Ivanka. But during today's White House briefing, communications director Kate Benfield faced the question head on. She said, "What kind of American, let alone an ex-president, thinks that this is the right time to enter into a scheme with Vladimir Putin and brag about his connections to Vladimir Putin?" She said, "There's only one, and it's Donald Trump." I want to get your thoughts on this. Anyone?
Surreal. Surreal. It's just surreal. I thought it was like an Onion article or something. It just didn't seem like it could possibly be actually happening, that right now in this moment, Trump is doubling down on the Russia thing. It's like truly, it gets weirder and weirder every day.
And I think that weirdness is going to really mess up their chances of retaking the House and the Senate, because they should be able to retake it, given everything else in historical. But the more he doubled down, and he's going to even triple down more and bring out this, it's going to equate him with Putin. And again, as more people who are blue eyes, blonde hair, get killed and all these things, and people actually watch white people get hurt and shot in these kind of things in Ukraine, it sends a different message. This is not the countries on the motherland. This is not the Middle East. And, people is like, whoopity-doo with those. That's, sad to say. This is something, like we have said before, this is them being shot and put on. These are their kids. This is their family. This is their relatives. That's going to turn the tide on the soccer moms. That's going to turn the tide on those in the suburban areas. And I believe it's going to help the Democrats win, because that was the worst. Whoever his advisor was should not do that.
I definitely, I disagree on the fact on how much Americans may care about the on-ground war on Ukraine. I'm not going to say American, but especially Republicans, because Republicans, their focus has always been on Biden and the things that they don't like about him. And as far as for me, I would just, the media and everyone loves to say Trump gets too much attention, but everything he says and does gets amplified, because it's so at some point, like, if the media really wants to like kind of lessen the impact that Trump has, they have to stop amplifying his foolish takes, because if you just give it life and you give it more breath and you give it more reach.
Yeah, the love story with Russia continues. It was an unforeseen love story, especially with the party, the Republican Party, who was, that was their claim to fame, that they ended the Cold War in the 80s and early 90s. And now we have, people cheering Russia on all over the Republican Party. So I don't know what's going to happen. It seems like the thought pattern with Russia was that they would go in and Ukraine would lay down, and it'd probably be over by now. I think it's carrying on a little longer than they wanted to. I think we live in a more globalized economy where it's easy for people to cut you off now and really hurt you financially very fast. That has a lot to do with, or will have a lot to do with, this conflict ending. And I also think that Putin, is not an idiot. He's a smart guy. He's a ex-KGB person, and he has a bone to pick with the United States of America, because he viewed, what they did to end the Cold War was really to tank, or not we per se, but the tanking of the Russian economy has always been blamed on the U.S., right or wrong.
And, I remember Stephen Collins saying, I think Trump learned his lesson. I think during the last impeachment proceeding, when she voted to not, after all of the hemming and hawing and running around and, toying with the idea of voting in favor of impeachment, she came out and she said, I think the president learned his lesson. And so I can't help but wonder what she's thinking now. I know a lot of attention has been on her because she's decided to vote for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation. But I'd love to hear what Senator Collins has to say about Trump. And this is like the third time. Remember in 2016, he said, Russia, if you're listening, we'd like to see what you have on Hillary Clinton. the same Zelensky who's fighting for his country now. He said, if you want some support, you want some aid for Ukraine, we want some dirt for Biden. Maybe we can work something out here. And here we have again Trump using a public platform to blatantly ask for a quid pro quo solely for his political gain. And so, should Democrats be nervous though at the same time that if the Republicans get the majority and Hunter Biden is now placed in the hot seat, that their 2024 chances are ruined or at least in jeopardy?
I think the fact that we have social media and we're watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox, every news station, morning news and night, almost constantly talk about Ukraine is something that Putin had not really calculated as much as he's KGB, because of the fact that it was when Walter Cronkite put the cameras on and other nations put the cameras on Vietnam is when Vietnam blew apart. Okay. World War II and other things, those were delayed things, and TV wasn't in everybody's houses in those times. And the other things. This is one of the first wars that we are constantly watching blow by blow. Building gets hit, we see it. This hospital crashes, we see it. School goes down, we see it. Okay. Our country and the Western countries are not used to watching this and their people and their faces like that. That's why, again, you can pay $4 and people are not screaming, because this is helping Ukraine. This is helping us, and all these other things. And see, we're looking at more white America that's into that, and then the Black America has been into the Supreme Court, and now with other things. So two things that are helping us. White America is going to come over with the soccer moms with Ukraine, with the way the Supreme Court justice was treated. Black America is coming over with that. All these things are crescendoing at the same time. And then the January 6th comes out. If the canary comes then through, you would have January 6th justice support and Ukraine, which is something that the Democrats could not have seen coming, which is a blessing for them. And they're going to put one more thing. They're going to put, which I've had because I got crazy loans. They're about to put a extension on the student loans too.
The extension on the student loans, I think, will help the Dems a lot. But however, I think you said it. You touched on social media and how it's in our face, but you forgot the biggest backlash of social media. While I push things in your face, it's always something else to get put in our face. And people's attention spans is really short. And when it comes to this war, I'll be interested if the average American who still have the conveniences of living their, regular day-to-day life and still have to worry about, work, getting up, going to work, doing this. And, because at the end of the day, like that's going to be their closest sphere of concern is right in front of them. So I'm sure their hearts will be with the Ukrainian people, but this modern social media and 24-hour news cycle, like you mentioned, eats up stories and spits them out. So I think it's TBD how much it matters. And I think the January 6th, like I've beat to death at this point, is I'm not sure how much that's important to the on the fence voters in Wisconsin that can give the GOP the House and the Senate.
No, that's why I said it's a variety of companies. Go ahead.
I want to say quickly, though, I think I see both perspectives, but one thing I think Ishmael kind of glossed over is that even if people, because I'm one of the ones like, I won't say I'm tired of seeing it, but like the coverage is a lot. So I try to avoid, but even us that are like, I guess you could say less dialed in, it's still going to hit you in other ways, whether that's gas prices going up, whether that's some kind of refugee crisis that affects like housing or healthcare. We're still barely making it through the COVID and pandemic as it is. So I think it's one of those things where it's big enough and can affect us in so many ways that even those who are not the most, for whatever reason, concerned with international foreign affairs will have to kind of tune in and give some kind of concern, because it's going to show up in one way. If they keep taking money out of the budget, if nothing else, people are going to notice those numbers, especially when you have things like student loans still sitting on the table. Every time, because I feel that way personally, every time I see like, oh, they just sent, such and such just added such and such billion to this budget for, this is like, that's great. I get it and I support it, but the loans are still on the table. At least do both. So, yeah, I think people are going to keep it in mind, if nothing else, for that.
Yeah.
One of my HBCUs got in trouble for that last week. I think they were giving free tuition for students who were from Ukraine, and then everybody got up and said, "Excuse me, we have all these student loans. You did not give us this kind of thing." And so the president had to write a note on that. It's in Virginia. I don't want to call them out, but they got in trouble for that because again, there's two different eyes that are looking at it. For those in a lot of minorities, African Americans, we are looking at our loans, and you're giving all these wipeouts to all these folks from Europe. Hello, and so that budget issue you talked about is going to be a key thing, Ms. Barry.
And
I think-
not to mention the racism too. If nothing else, Black people will remember how other Black people are being treated in Ukraine. So
Thank you.
that little piece of solidarity there is going to hold weight. I hope, at least.
I think that one thing that one additional thing that Dr. Davis did not mention in his list of things that are impacting how much we think about this is also sort of like the soft influence of Europe. Like that's the United States' closest group of allies of the European nations. And they are looking at this totally differently than we are, because for us, like it's something that we are observing. It's like how sad, it's sad. We want to do something about it because it's sad, and we have like a little bit of an idea of it being a threat, like maybe nukes, kind of a distant sort of threat. Whereas for the Europeans who they're Europeans, they have grandparents who remember being invaded and being bombed, and what that actual experience of war was like. War was there in their homes, not a distant thing. Like as traumatizing as every war has been for American people, it's always been over there, at least the last couple hundred years. So that's a totally different mentality, and I think that sort of like the piercingness of that feeling among European people, I think that will bleed over into Americans a lot, just because of the global interconnected nature of things now. People have family relationships. They remember their homelands, and they have connections to those places, and so I think that is another thing that's going to impact the way the United States handles this the situation.
And I would just to try to frame this issue just a little bit more macro. I hope the U.S. government is trying to push for peace between the Ukraine and Russian government. However, my fear would be that they're trying to, or they would be supportive of some kind of longer standing engagement to deplete the Russian government and to really try to destabilize Russia. I think that's what, because I get that this war is crucial, but what is our approach? What is our goal? Is our goal to push for peace, or is our goal to destabilize Russia by having like some Afghanistan type proxy war with Ukraine and Russia, and just keep feeding the military and dragging this out? So that's what that was my concern would be with the administration's foreign policy.
So Florida Governor DeSantis kept his promise this past Tuesday, and he vetoed a new congressional map, while also calling for a mid-April special legislative session so that lawmakers can craft new maps that satisfy him. The governor said during a press conference at the Capitol in Florida, he contended the legislator-approved congressional map by calling it defective, and he said that it violated federal law. He made clear he would be opposed to any proposal designed to keep intact districts that had a sizable minority population, but where minority voters do not constitute an overall majority. He said, "We have a responsibility to produce maps for our citizens that do not contain unconstitutional racial gerrymanders." He said, "Today I vetoed a map that violates the U.S. Constitution, but that does not absolve the legislator from doing their job." He's also expressed that he wants to avoid having the state's congressional map imposed by the courts. Lawsuits have already been filed in both the federal and the state courts asking judges to take over the redistricting process because the governor and legislature have been in a standoff. And so I want to ask you guys, what is the likelihood that the courts would intervene? Of course, that's with the backdrop of the removal of Section 5 from the Voting Rights Act being taken out. So now states like Florida that have a history of voter discrimination can basically make their own voting laws as they see fit without any oversight from the Justice Department. What is the likelihood of a court intervening and serving as a referee in this situation where the legislator and Governor DeSantis, who, by the way, has his own 2024 hopes and aspirations, being that they can't, those two entities cannot come to an agreement?
I don't know how many ways Ron DeSantis can announce that he's running for president in 2024, but it seems like he's pretty good at throwing hints out there. He's the standard bearer for Republican politics right now. Besides that, everything he's doing is in line with conspiracy theorists, power grabbers, and people who are looking to take over the big seat. I think he's putting his last few points on his resume to make the case. So I would fully expect that in Florida. But I think this whole gerrymandering thing is going both ways. The courts ruled against New York this week. Alabama is a mess too. With that, I forget which district that is in Alabama that has tentacles into Black communities to hide that community's vote from being put into the rest of the state. So I think there's a lot of that gamesmanship with districts that are going on that are getting batted down by the courts, not just Florida.
Well, one of the things that leading on to what he's saying is in terms of how the governor is announcing that he's running for president, this kind of him injecting himself into this kind of a situation allows the whole Florida legislature to have to reopen itself for the next month to do this all over again. So that would keep him constantly in the news on this issue. He's already in the news with the gay issue. He's already in the news with the transgendered issue. He's already in the news with every other kind of issue you can think of down in Florida. Plus, Trump is inside of his state. He lives inside of his state. So when you put all those kind of things together, and his possible hope, even though he doesn't want to say it loud, of how the January 6th may hurt Trump and everything else, he got to position himself. So they have 28 congressional districts down there. All right. Florida got added another one. They currently have 27 from the other elections. So they cannot move forward with the election until this is worked out with those other 28. And therefore, this is going to create a problem until another judge gets in to settle this. And this is something that he's doing to show he is in the center of it. And I think that's where he wants to stay.
This seems to me like strategically, it's a good move for him.
Oh, yeah.
This argument that he's making about the unconstitutional racial gerrymandering means that he kind of probably feels like he's going to win either way. Because if he gets the legislature to do what he wants, great. If it ends up becoming something that is a legal issue that goes up to the Supreme Court, great. Either way, if it goes to the courts, if it gets solved in the legislature, he kind of wins. So as a purely political chess move, it seems like a good idea. I really hope, honestly, and I can see why another thing that he did is put pressure on them in Florida to solve it in the legislature. Because if I'm a Democratic congressperson, I don't want this going to the Supreme Court right now. I don't want to push this through the courts because that's not going to end up looking good. It's going to have really far-reaching consequences if there's some new novel unconstitutional racial gerrymandering argument used to dismantle Black districts across the country. That's a nightmare. So this is genuinely very concerning.
And when we're talking about the changes that were proposed by the legislator, the proposal from January would have kept Republicans at 16 seats, and so DeSantis asked the state Supreme Court to weigh in on whether this Black representative from Tallahassee, his name is Lawson, whether his seat was constitutional. The court declined the governor's request, but DeSantis continued his threats to veto any map, and he kept good on his promise. The House, in response, drew a new proposal that wiped out Lawson's seat and instead replaced it with one confined to Jacksonville. That House Republicans say should still guarantee the election of a Black candidate. House Republicans said that they drew up the revised proposal to address the novel legal theory advanced by the governor. They also created an escape hatch by proposing a second map that kept Lawson's seat intact in case the first map was rejected by the courts. And so there seems to be this intentional effort to kind of break up the voting power that minorities have in a given district. I want to get your thoughts on that too as we're drawing to a close.
Hell, Jacksonville is his home, and he can play to a lot of the base, different sides of the party. He can try to get his African American base in there, and that he's like, Brother Jordan, he was talking about. He can try to play over here a little bit, and then he's going to play over there. This is a very strategic move this governor's doing from that standpoint, and he's doing a combination of different issues all at one time, and that's what's the key is he's playing to some different groups of people, and it's hard to just attack him on one thing. And he's a smart guy. Don't like his politics, but I like his strategies. He plays on 5-dimensional tables, and that's the key of how he puts it together. And that's not easy to attack.
I think gerrymandering has been a fundamental problem in the American, Democratic Republic for a while now, and I hope that it's something that can get some kind of bipartisan solution or grassroots attention at some point, because at the end of the day, people their vote boundaries should be drawn in reasonable manners, as just to try to give a reflective count of that area, so people can vote and control their own destiny to a large extent. And I think we just need to kind of refocus this issue and get back to just get away from it, because this gerrymander has been an issue for quite a while, and it's a very serious issue because it affects the way you can get things done. Even if you want to make change, it could be a fundamental barrier to that.
I agree.
I was going to say too, I think, well, the first thing when I kind of hear his argument is like a politicization of reverse racism. Like it isn't a thing, but since you guys get to play that card, we can play it too in this way. And so I think that's going to become more of a trend, in a lot of different major social issues, like it already has been. What am I thinking of? The quota system to get into affirmative action, things like that. The other thing I was going to say is I don't know if I would be so confident as you guys are saying if I'm in DeSantis' position when it comes to like, if the legislature gets it, cool. If the courts get it, I'm not so sure that the courts, I'm not that familiar, of course, with Florida courts, so that's going to have a lot to do with it. But just at least at the federal level, I don't know if it's a guaranteed victory. I think there is, I feel like a big enough grassroots push publicly and, politically about independent, redistricting committees. And like you said, keeping it bipartisan because it's such a vital issue, and voting rights is supposed to be something that, everybody cares about if you want, a real democracy. So, but obviously it works to the contrary. Anyway, I say all that to say, I think the courts may not be as sure, easy win for his agenda, even though, like you said, he's still playing in 4 different other arenas. So not there, but with regard to at least the maps drawing, I think he may be a little more flustered with the outcome than he would.
What happens with that is this: if he wins, he's the champion. Okay, he was right. If he loses, then he's the victim.
Like a martyr kind of.
Play that the courts, the liberal courts have come against me. And those liberal, even though the conservative courts, you just say it and people think they're liberal. Okay, that's all you need to say. And he will, Trump can bleed, but this guy can bleed too. And he would bleed before you get even blood around. He's already got the bandages all up there, and people already crying. And so that's how he's presenting himself. So he's going to be the first one to champion himself, and he's going to be the first one to bleed whichever way. And so when that person can switch that way and put the tears on or put the championship on that way, it's hard to shoot.
And all of this, hesitation by DeSantis to want the courts to intervene. DeSantis replaced the 3 most liberal justices on the Florida Supreme Court in 2019 when they each stepped down. Trump elevated 2 of them to the federal appellate court in Atlanta and created 2 openings for DeSantis to fill. And so it seems as if even if the courts were to intervene, the odds would be in his favor that they would issue a ruling that he would be happy with. If this ended up like a Bush versus Gore scenario and we ended up in the Florida Supreme Court, it just seems like the justices that he appointed would be the ones to make the final determination, have the final say in terms of the redistricting maps in the first place. Any other thoughts before we conclude? Okay, if not, Dr. Davis, Mr. Nongpa, Maya, Ismail, Jordan, it's a pleasure to have you on episode 60. Thank you guys for what you brought to the table. I enjoyed this conversation. I apologize for the technical hiccups tonight, but there's always something that you haven't prepared for. You can prepare for as many things as you'd like, and there's always going to be something that you didn't think of. But I want to thank each of you for what you brought, the very thoughtful commentary and thought-provoking perspectives that you brought to the table. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and conclude episode 60.
Enjoy, y'all.
60 of the Local Mic Podcast. Thank you guys so much.